All right, so tell me why you're suing the president.
Okay. So the lawsuit against the president is challenging Executive Order 14321. It's called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets, but it actually tries to revive vagrancy laws, which basically target people who have the status of being homeless or unhoused, having mental health conditions, or having substance use disorders.
Is that what a vagrancy law is?
Yes, a vagrancy law is something that it uses broad language. I'm gonna tell you why vagrancy laws are unconstitutional as well as what they are. What vagrancy was considered was is it's who you are, it's not what you've done. So a vagrant is someone who does not have a job, who exists in public, who sleeps outside, who begs for money. They may or may not be doing those things at any given time, but vagrancy laws target the vagrant as opposed to the actual acts that may be happening. What vagrancy laws did was where they gave the police the ability to arbitrarily arrest anybody and to convict them without real concrete definitions of what they were doing wrong. And that's why vagrancy laws were found to be unconstitutional in the 70s.
Because they could target people for who
Yeah,
are.
because the vagrancy laws were vague, they were overbroad, and they encouraged arbitrary arrests.
And so they're targeting people who not what they did, but just people, just who they are, status of life.
Yes. So the executive order that I'm suing the president over targets homeless people. It basically declares, it actually uses the word vagrancy. It says fighting vagrancy in America's streets.
Oh wow.
And it says, which is crazy, but it says that people who are homeless, people who have mental health conditions, or people who have substance abuse disorders are a danger to themselves or others just by default, and it gives agencies the authority to target them, to lock them up via a process called civil commitment, without having ever charged them with a crime, and force them into what it calls treatment centers. But the way that it is being implemented, it's looking like they're trying to make concentration camps essentially for homeless people.
Why do you think it's leading to concentration camps?
Well, there are agencies throughout the country, particularly the Homeless Services Board in Utah, has designed a new 1,400 bed facility where they're having what they call mandated or mandatory accountability centers. So once somebody is determined to be homeless, they are allowed to be locked up. The theory is that they'll be taken to this accountability center and forced either into treatment, drug treatment. Maybe they need it, maybe they don't. Simply the fact that you're homeless is an indication under this executive order that you're in need of some kind of treatment. So it will force them into this center, and they actually plan on forcing labor. So that you'll be forced to take whatever job that they have lined up for you.
How would they get forced into it?
That's what it says. It'll be a condition of their stay there. Potentially, they'll be held hostage and say, "We're not going to release you until you work for us for a period of time, or until we're in charge of you working for somebody else." I want to let you know the 13th Amendment, uh, which was a part of the process to end chattel slavery in America, to free the slaves. Uh, the 13th Amendment says that involuntary servitude is a crime, except as punishment for a crime. It's illegal unless you've been convicted of committing a crime. So this executive order tries to circumvent that and says, we're just going to take people who are on the street not doing nothing, force them into these facilities, and we're going to put them in the labor camps.
What's the connection between the lawsuit where you're suing the president and the labor camps?
Well, okay, so the Homeless Services Board in Utah expressly drew this up. It says this is our plan to be in compliance with Executive Order 14321. So they're not um, hiding it. One of the exhibits in the suit is a confidential document, but they have written and produced these documents kind of publicly saying that this is a part of our plan to implement this executive order. So it's easy to draw the connection.
Is this all homeless people, or how are they getting the homeless people there?
All homeless people. So this would be Utah's particular implementation, but it is an example of the plans for how this executive order will be used. Essentially, it will be used in all cases to detain people who have not been charged with a crime, and that is a violation of due process. That is a seizure. It's a violation of your Fifth Amendment. Uh, it is a privacy violation. It is a
Well,
liberty interest violation.
I'm trying to figure out how your lawsuit affects this, because so homeless people for now, are they going to take them out of where they live now? Are they going,
That's
how the
another really important part. And this is going on in my case and in two other cases that were filed in Rhode Island, that the executive order is especially insidious because, on the one hand, it says to end funding for Housing First, which is the nationwide primary way of preventing and intervening in homelessness. It says we're going to cut all the funding for Housing First. And what the Housing and Urban Development HUD has done, and they've specifically written that in order to be in compliance with this executive order, they've made changes to the continuum of care that would have made 170,000 individuals nationwide homeless. So it makes about 200,000 homeless people. And then on the other hand, it targets them to lock them up and saying that because you're now homeless, even though we cut the funding to make you homeless, and now that you are homeless, we're going to lock you up.
so cutting the funding to homeless people to put them out in the street, and then the police targeting them to end up in concentration camp.
Yes.
How would the police target them?
Well, one way is that it actually the executive order uh, directs agencies within the continuum of care to turn over the information on their clients who are seeking services from homeless services agencies, whether it's shelter, whether it's referrals for different types of treatment, mental health treatment, or housing services, whatever it is. It instructs these agencies to turn the information on these people over to law enforcement. So it creates a nationwide database of people who are receiving services from the kind of homeless industrial complex. That's one way that it will find and target them. The other ways is that they will actually go out on the street. And as they come into contact with people, they can just arbitrarily say, "Hey, you look homeless to me. Your shoes are dirty. You smell funny. You seem like a drug addict."
How does it
So
give them the right to just grab anybody?
well, what it does is it declares uh, these three categories of individuals, which is people who are homeless and unable to pay for their own upkeep,
Mm.
people who have mental health disorders, and people who have substance use disorders. It declares them universally a danger to themselves and others, and then it asserts an authority to impose what is called civil commitment, and that is so illegal, it's not funny. It's incredibly unconstitutional.
Why? What is civil commitment?
Well, civil commitment, there is a process where if you are having a mental health crisis, if you have threatened to people, if you go into a hospital and say, "I'm afraid, I believe, I want to myself," there is a process. That process is called civil commitment that gives the hospital the authority to accept you into their psychiatric care units. So this is a existing legal process and medical process whereby individuals are admitted into care, and it takes it and now um, turns it into a law enforcement function. So instead of people who are receiving treatment or they're maybe called to a place like an ambulance or something where
Mm.
people are saying, "Oh, this person needs help," and there's an evaluator, and normally in the regular civil commitment process, a judge has to order that you as an individual exhibited XYZ behaviors and are there and have been declared by a judge to be a danger to yourself or others, and therefore will be committed um, until such time as they can treat you or figure out what you're going to do. That is a very narrow scope for an individual with individual lives
So
assessment. But in
so
this context, it allows the police to go out there and say, anybody that we think is homeless, anybody that we think has mental health conditions or a drug problem, we can just decide to institute this person with the civil commitment
so
framework.
people could go into the hospital for treatment to get help and unknowingly be putting themselves in a police database.
Yes, 100%. When people go, so like say if somebody is evicted from their home, they could go to their local crisis center. They sign up to receive services from the local continuum of care. And a part of those services, maybe they want to prevent eviction. Maybe they want the emergency rental assistance program. Maybe they want help with their moving costs or to try to seek funds to put their stuff into storage. Maybe they're looking to come into emergency shelter while they find themselves another place. That information, because of this executive order, will be turned over to law enforcement agencies who may or may not determine that this person is a danger to themselves or others because they're now homeless and target them for civil commitment, for detention.
And
Without,
this something that didn't exist before.
no, this did not exist before. This was implemented in, I believe, June of 2025. So we're going on 7 months now. It's pretty dystopic because in America, you have due process. In order to be detained, you have to be suspected of a crime. You have to be charged with a crime, and there are very definite processes in order to restrict someone's liberties.
And this bypasses you actually having criminal activity.
Yes. So
Yeah.
this is a violation of what they call substantive due process and also procedural due process, because a person who's been detained is entitled to be charged with a crime, to face their accusers, to have a trial. You see what I'm saying? To be judged by a jury of their peers, whether or not they're actually doing something wrong. But because of this determination that homeless people are dangerous inherently, it's a similar thought process to saying that an immigrant is illegal inherently. Simply by having existed, a person is now illegal. What this does is it takes that kind of mental framework and transfers it over to homeless people, people with mental health disorders, and people with substance abuse disorders.
Do you have an idea of how many people, percentage wise, I suppose, who are homeless have mental health issues or don't have mental health issues?
To be honest, at any job that you would go to, if any person who has a job, there's a chance that there's a high likelihood that at least one of your coworkers is facing housing instability. They are, whether they're on the street or not. There are so many people in this country living in their cars, living in hotels, couch surfing. We're dealing with a huge systemic issue in this country where the majority of people are or know someone who is facing a problem with their housing. So when you say how many people does this affect, it's nearly everyone.
Well, I'm trying to figure out. Yes, indirectly, I just realized what you're saying. But also, I'm trying to figure out how many people, how many homeless people do have mental health issues. Because I'm trying to figure out the
So
fair.
as far as the overlap between homelessness and mental health,
Hmm.
it's a chicken and egg issue. So we live in a society where there, half of people, half of women are on SSRIs. There are so many people dealing with mental health issues that it's just going to be the case that the majority of homeless people have some. mental health condition.
Makes sense. Tell me about what you're doing in the process.
Well, what I've done is presented, I believe, 11 claims to the federal court in Greenbelt, Maryland, um, that are saying essentially that the executive order is unconstitutional. I'm seeking what's called declaratory relief. So I'm asking the federal court to declare that the executive order is unconstitutional and to enjoin Scott Turner, the Secretary of HUD, from implementing any um, actions based on the executive order.
When you do that, does that cover the entire executive order or just parts, or is it just kind of a short?
Yes. Well, so it is possible that um some of my claims may not be accepted, or I may lose some portion of the claim, but I believe that each and every one of these claims are valid, and that the executive order violates the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, the 13th Amendment, and the 14th Amendment, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Civil Rights Act, and the Administrative Procedure Act. So, for a bunch of different reasons, the executive order is unconstitutional, and I only need to succeed in one of the 11 claims for the order to be declared unconstitutional.
What are the claims you're making?
Well, we talked a little bit about procedural due process and substantive due process. Those are two of the claims. Another of the claims is the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. People have the right to equal protection under the law. Okay, that is regardless of their status, whether they are housed or unhoused, whether or not they have a mental health disorder, whether or not in order to be to have their liberties restricted, an individual must be given due process. They have to have the same protections. So one person who is doing well cannot just be arbitrarily detained. And so a person who's struggling with housing instability or struggling with their mental health must be given the same protection. Uh,
Okay.
there, there are Fifth Amendment privacy and liberty interests. So persons cannot be forced to divulge their health records. When someone comes to a behavioral health agency like the Department of Health and Human Services, which is where the continuum of care is, they are providing lots of information about their history, their substance abuse history, their mental health history. These records are protected under HIPAA, just like your STD results or your cancer results are. So the same way, and these all tie in together. So when you go to the doctor, if you have astigmatism or if you have a tumor and you're getting a biopsy, that is protected information. And if a person is receiving care under the continuum of care, those are medical records that have to be protected, and you cannot force a person to turn those over, especially in the context of detention. So when it comes to real crimes, we have what we know as Fifth Amendment rights. So you have the right to remain silent, to not incriminate yourself. But what this executive order does is essentially force people to incriminate themselves by revealing to law enforcement agencies that they are homeless. So it criminalizes homelessness and then forces homeless services agencies to turn over information about who's homeless.
What's the process been like from how did this start? How did you get into it?
Well, I live inside the continuum of care. And so I'm at a homeless shelter in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I am designated, for certain types of housing programs. I also have mental health conditions, and I'm receiving services for all of those. The county executive here and the company, Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, that is partnered with the county to manage this facility and other permanent supportive housing facilities. They held a rally where they informed us that as a result of this executive order, $2.5 billion would be cut from the continuum of care, and over 1,000 residents here in Montgomery County were going to lose their housing, and that everybody, all of us, would not be housed, and we could potentially lose the shelter as well. So when I heard about that, attending the rally for PSH, I knew that um, I had to do something to save myself and others like me.
So you would essentially be forced into the streets if they cut this funding.
Yes, well, essentially, so we could be there are agent like churches and other places before they built up the continuum of care that would offer services, but essentially, people would be out on the street without the infrastructure in place to help them get back on their feet or get the housing or the other services that could make their lives better, get them back into functioning society, or at least get them off the streets. So all that would have been lost without this lawsuit and two other lawsuits that have been filed by a coalition of states in one case and the National Alliance to End Homelessness in another case.
So there was something that you the beginning of the process.
So when I found out about what was going on, I actually asked the county executive if they were planning on suing the administration regarding the cuts to the continuum of care. They said that they were, um, but we're really worried because we're all like dependent on this shelter and places like it to be able to stay indoors. As right now, it's January and it's very cold outside. It's extremely cold, and we could die from exposure. Um, it just places us in really precarious kind of condition.
Not just Maryland. How many people nationally? Because of course, it's we have even colder places than Maryland.
Uh, living outside, living actually outside, even unsheltered, there are hundreds of thousands of individuals in America. In shelters, also hundreds of thousands, millions facing housing instability. And then there are almost 200,000 individuals who have already been housed through the continuum of care that would lose their housing as a result of policies implemented directly because of the executive order.
What kind of progress have you made so far? Where are you in the process?
So my case was filed in October, served in November, and so the Department of Justice has until the 27th of this month to file their response. Um, They have not yet entered an appearance, but after I filed my case, a coalition of 20 states, including the Attorney General of Maryland, filed a similar claim in Rhode Island. And so the progress that I'm seeing at this time is the result of advocacy groups and states and senators and congressmen who are writing and advocating and suing to prevent the destabilization of their communities, the loss of funds, and just chaos. They're trying to prevent it. So, and my case is still in the very beginning stages, but we've already seen a preliminary injunction against those cuts in Rhode Island. And that is all the difference. So for right now, that funding is saved, but it's temporary. We need, and what my case does that the other cases don't do is my case directly challenges the president's executive order that is not just targeting the elimination of funding for housing first, but the forcing of that targeted individual database. The executive order also tells the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to seek the reversal of judicial decisions that protect homeless people and people with mental health conditions and so my lawsuit essentially goes at the heart of the issue by challenging the executive order itself.
I can't help but wonder why the other lawsuits aren't doing the same thing. And these lawsuits are coming from the states.
Yeah, so a coalition of states. The first lawsuit was um, by the National Alliance to End Homelessness and another organization. And what they are doing, what those two suits do, is they are actually suing HUD, essentially under the Administrative Procedure Act, saying that the changes are not well reasoned. They're arbitrary and capricious. They're going to cause chaos. They're going to adversely affect the public, which they will. And what they're trying to do is stop the cuts that are going to put people directly on the streets. I don't know why they chose not to go after the executive order itself. I'm doing this by myself and I'm not an attorney, so I don't know what their reasoning was. But my reasoning was that these policies from HUD and from other agencies are expressly written to have been to be in compliance or to implement the directives in Executive Order 14321. So I decided to challenge that itself.
How are the states making the accommodations to be in compliance with the executive order? Like, is it just Utah? Is it everyone?
Well, Utah is certainly the first state, the test bed for the forced labor camp. Um, but there are other states who, every state, what the executive order is, or who it's directed towards, is towards the federal executive agencies. So it specifically directs the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, HUD, and other similar agencies. So states with similar politics are kind of coming up with their own creative ways to implement this executive order. But if you look beyond the order, you can see that this is a philosophy that that people in this country are worthless, or that they're illegal, that they could be disposed of or dehumanized in certain ways and exploited. And people who believe in that kind of philosophy or hold those kind of politics are those states, those agencies are kind of taking it upon themselves um, to move and be in compliance with this order. So
So
it's
so by criminalizing homelessness, essentially the principle of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, kind of thing.
yes, yes, but specifically, every state in America has a continuum of care. Um, and that's how those funds for Housing First are distributing. Currently, 80% of funds in the continuum of care are used for permanent supportive housing, and they are attempting to uh, restrict those funds greatly by taking them from 80% down to 30%. And due to the requirements, they're putting gender ideology requirements. So programs that recognize um, different pronouns or transgenders, or uh, people who have a harm reduction model, or people who have a housing first model, can become ineligible for funds entirely. So it's a really political act. It is not a reasoned act. All the academic studies over the last 20 years, even up until the last couple of years, show that the housing first model greatly reduces dependence on emergency services, it really saves lives. And people who are given permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing, or people who are receive services under the continuum of care and are housed through there, greatly reduce their need to use the different emergency services. So it saves billions and billions of dollars.
So the money that they're taking away essentially is going to cost more in the long run,
Yes,
unless
yes.
unless find some way to monetize homeless people.
It's both inefficient and kind of a corrupt transfer of funds from the existing homeless services industry and infrastructure over to the administration's favorite people who are implementing the policies in the way that they view as politically viable.
What
basically.
what do you think the first wave would look like after funding is cut, if it does continue to get cut?
So had that preliminary injunction not be there, uh, the the new funding round doesn't come in until closer to the end of the year, and uh, what happened is the programs would just lose their funding, and so there would just be people, 100,000 people would just be given notices. Hey, your the funding for your lease, for your program, for your shelter, for your transitional housing or whatever has been cut. You have X amount of time to leave, and people would essentially crowd up the shelters. The shelter system would become jam packed, overflow. They wouldn't know what to do. It
Well,
would just
they're already because they turn
yes,
away at a certain point anyway.
yes, they're already overflowing. So, but they would basically clog the local homeless services system, and there's no way around it. What you would see are hundreds of thousands of more people living on the street, going into jails, going into hospitals, um, and committing survival crimes like stealing food, uh, entering into buildings, abandoned buildings and houses and stuff just to try to find shelter. So that's what you would see where that funding to be
And these
cut.
are people who already have mental health issues, who already need help.
Some of them, uh, many homeless people are working. Many these people who are already housed, whose funding would be cut to put them out on the street, um, are many of them for the first time in their lives finally stable, finally working. They're often in treatment, and they're like getting their stuff together and are not utilizing these emergency services. And when that funding is cut, these people will be forced to find new ways to survive. And because of the overflow and the clogging up of the system, it wouldn't just be the shelters that would be turning people away. You would see hospitals implementing policies to weed out or select individuals that are, in this situation and turn them away for care. And once people are actually outside, you're talking about the purge. You're talking about Hunger Games. You're talking about things that people who had no intention of waking up this morning to steal stuff or to break into stuff or to do these things are feeling like it's necessary to simply not die of exposure or hunger.
Is that why you think they're criminalizing the status of homelessness, and not just the actions to try to get ahead of that?
Well,
And with
I
it, a
don't
problem.
want to make myself sound like a conspiracy theorist. So what I will say is that I honestly believe that it's a lack of creativity on the part of the administration. It's a lack of vision. Um, it's a lack of empathy and of humanity and of understanding that every human is a world of potential, is a world of opportunity. And my hope with this case is not just to stop the cutting of funding or the targeting of homeless people, but to open the broader conversation about housing being a human right and about how we move forward as you see more automation in our economy and as you see less and less of a job market that we kind of grew up in and that we understand to be normal. As that shifts and changes, the question is, what do we do with everybody? Are we going to target them, put them in camps, hope that they starve and die and just kind of fizzle out? Or do we give people an opportunity to develop themselves, to have children, to raise children, to invent the future? And I think that this zero sum thought process of if you don't have it now, you're worthless and you never will be anything, and we're going to punish your poverty. I really just see it as a misguided um, philosophy, a misguided perspective. And I hope that eventually the administration, the corporations, the governments will come to see the light and kind of view housing as a human right. And I think that if we all think about what the possibilities are for that, that we can have a real win-win scenario for all of us.
Why do you think? How do you think? 'Cause my first thought is that funding and like affordability. How could we make housing a human right? How could we be able to afford that?
Okay, well, we live in a our money is fiat. This is something that is going to be touchy, for people who really are at the top of the system to even say out loud or to talk about. But our money simply is because we declare it to be. We don't. It's not actually based on heavy metals or any of that type of stuff. Uh, and what housing as a human right, in my mind,
Mm.
represents a vision. One of the biggest kind of problems is that as these jobs of necessity of like growing food, our agriculture, big agriculture is largely automated. As we look at healthcare, which is becoming more and more automated, as we look at all the main and delivery, as we have like self-driving vehicles and all that type of stuff. What is the vision for the future? Our economy is just distributing resources, but the question is to what end? To do what? And I think that um, giving people, creating a high quality of life for individuals to learn, to grow, and to create is really a highest calling. And I look at housing as a human right as almost like a vision for the future that it is something like the pyramids. And I think that the imagine what it's like to raise well-adjusted, healthy, happy, and educated children. Think about the incredible potential of human beings um, who whose parents did not have to live under wage slavery. You're asking where the money comes from.
So
I'm saying that money is what we decide it to be. And that it is not that if you take one thing, we don't live in the economy where you make shoes and I make loaves of bread and we have to exchange them in order to have anything. We live in an economy of electricity inputs, mechanization, and product line outputs. And so you or I or average people we know in America operate in a services economy where we're serving food, answering phone calls, doing Zoom calls, and become TikTok influencers and whatnot. And so the this whole "where's the money gonna come from" thing is almost a non-question for real, because where does any of it come from now? It's numbers in a computer.
so you're saying you think that the current automation that we're experiencing in society can lead to people having more free time and leading to more productive people, which then compounds to now a more productive society and a more flourishing society, and then so on and so forth, to
Yes.
where we really could have housing because of people essentially reaching more of their full potential.
Yes, for the first time in history. It would have never before been possible, but because of automation, right now, there are more, vacant homes than there are homeless people in America. It's simply a mismanagement, a misallocation of resources. It's malinvestment, on the part of those, elites or whatever, and this whole, I'm not against profit. I believe that there will always be jobs. I believe that, that it's just that a basic quality of living just provides a floor so that individuals can be entrepreneurial, so that they can be innovative, so that they can educate themselves, so that they can raise their children, and that housing as a human right is both possible. The resources and the infrastructure are already in place. We wouldn't lose anything. You wouldn't need to build um, new sewer systems or new water pipes like these, not any more so than what is already required. Where these and the opposite is actually true, is that the more people you disenfranchise because they didn't because they weren't, they're not millionaires, the more potential you have to actually destroy this beautiful system that we've built. and this great infrastructure that we have, um, it starts to corrode, and it starts to degrade as we stop putting in. We just need a new way of looking at things, a new paradigm. And housing as a human right is what um, I really think is necessary to have a higher frequency, a greater efficiency, and a greater safety. You can't. It's not even a capitalist country if 10 people have all the capital. So at minimum, individuals should have um, the freedom of their own human capital, which is the greatest cost. Any business owner will tell you that labor is the greatest expense.
What do you think it would take to get to the point where housing is a human right?
I think it would take, and here's the counterintuitive part, right?
Hmm.
So, in order to have housing as a human right, it will require first a national conversation. It will require a constitutional amendment. It will require an act of Congress. And then what you would see is the largest jobs training and jobs program in American history. You would see a vision that everyone in America would love and want to get behind. People who have not participated in the labor force in decades would come out of retirement to build housing for future generations because they will believe in housing as a human right for their kids and grandkids. You would see for on the government side, you would see that the first large government to adopt housing as a human right would become the center of the world, would become almost like the world government. Everyone in the world would want to be where housing is a human right. And you would see other governments immediately claim it was their idea all along, that they always wanted to do it, and that this is the really something that was was their philosophy forever. But housing as a human right would create almost like a new divine right of kings for our governments, because anywhere in however many people a government had, they would have now the divine right to acquire as much resources that would be necessary to house their individuals. To if housing is a human right, then the materials to build those are a part of our sovereignty. And so it would be massive for corporations. There would be a series of multi-trillion dollar industries that would go behind building housing as a human right. Learning centers, you would see the reintroduction of third places. And so we're already living, third places are libraries, parks. Third places were places that used to exist before you had to spend money every time you went outside. So instead of Starbucks and McDonald's being the only place you can go, and movie theaters and malls, now that nobody has any money to spend on those things anyway, we actually need a revitalization of our natural spaces, our recreation, our learning centers, our loving, our places to get to know one another, to develop ourselves, and to care for one another. I believe that housing as a human right would really foster this as a second. There would be secondary and tertiary places. If you need housing, you need all kinds of other things to go along with it. And this idea of housing as a human right, it's just inevitable, along with the universal basic income.
Why do you
Uh,
think it's inevitable?
it's inevitable because we're entering an age when your shirt and my shoes, um, and these things are made by a machine. There are individuals, artisans, who still produce that craft, and it's wonderful, and there always will be. The fact that the majority of things that we need, that we use, like our water, like the majority of our food, are all mechanized and highly automated and industrialized. Are this this means that there are, and now with artificial intelligence, right? We have far less of a need for many of these services industry, or that individuals can do less and less to earn a living, because as this stuff is done at scale, the cost per unit goes down and down. So even so, when individuals produce things, they can't sell enough of them at a good enough margin to make a living, and it's not necessary anyway, because the majority of stuff is electrical inputs, electrical and materials inputs, and product outputs. So these are kind of corporate. We're less like a traditional society today and more like a beehive. And what you need are citizens who are interested in various parts of the system, who go from flower to flower, checking the pollen and making sure everything's good, bringing it back to the hive or the larger system, and kind of running it that way. And you'll see that. So when people have children, they become interested in the school system. When people want new parks and new libraries, they become involved in local government. And I think you'll see that the future job that will be common, the way an Uber driver is today, a delivery, a Uber Eats person, is you'll see is that the active citizen, the involved citizen, will be really the primary job of the future. And people will still have jobs, and those jobs will pay extremely well because no one will be forced to go to it.
What uh what would you say? Because there seems to be a mentality in America specifically right now
Mhm.
that people are, if they're not forced to work, they're not going to work and they're lazy.
I mean, look at the pyramids. It's people. In fact, the absolute opposite is true. So in 90+% of jobs, individual, and this is whether they're unskilled or skilled. You could be a doctor, you could be an attorney, you could be working at Foot Locker. The vast majority of people in their jobs are depressed, specifically because they are operating so far beneath their capacity. People yearn to live at their full potential, to work and to develop and to grow and to provide at the greatest capacity they can. And I think that the great malady of today's society is that we're all trudging and drudging, and we want to go to sleep because we feel like it's futile and we'll never have the opportunity to be our greatest selves. And I think that housing as a human right will allow just that. And you'll see quantum leaps in every field imaginable. And you'll see the creation of fields that we didn't, that don't currently exist. You'll see us regular people. I mean, I myself have a GED, um, and I'm living in a homeless shelter. I'm suing the president of the United States to save $2.5 billion for the continuum of care and to advocate for housing as a human right. And I think that the more people have time to learn, to grow, and to find their best selves, uh, you will see the singularity that techies and people like that, all the things are here, all the puzzle pieces are here, but people themselves are caught in the necessity that is a product of wage slavery. So when housing is a human right, uh, people will do things. People do far more for the love. There are millions of people who work jobs that they hate, and they have a 9 to 5, and then they have a 5 to 9, which is their passion project. Whether they're artists, whether they're musicians, whether they're craftspersons, um, and even people in the professional fields have secondary. They always have enterprises and things that they want to come up with and do, and they have to use their reserve energy and their reserve, and it's becoming harder and harder because as things become more and more expensive, they are able to be their true selves less and less, and it is causing a mass depression.
I heard someone say one of the reasons that people are at their highest earning capacity, I think it was in their 50s or 60s or something like that, is because after they retire, they finally do the thing that they've always wanted to do.
100%.
Uh,
And you'll always give the most to your labor of love. uh the
so
the the ve-
the society,
yes,
essentially.
the very idea that people are driven by money itself is a fallacy. It's just not true. The majority of people don't have any money. The majority of people aren't driven by money. They are the only reason why the majority of people even work for money at all is not even for themselves. It's to take care of their children, their families. It's to do things for people on Christmas and birthdays. It's to put into the thing that they love. Um, and if we let people live from love, you'll find that we live a lot better. That's just what I like to believe.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of support are you getting so far?
Well, there's you, Mike. And I do get support from individuals who work in the Montgomery County agencies and the local government. I've spoke with Senator Angela Also Brooks, the county executive Mark Ehrlich. I've spoken with several the delegates here in Maryland. I work with a group called Housing Justice Montgomery. Um, and a lot of the people who work here at the shelter, the clinical team, they all have support. When I reach out to advocacy attorneys, to national groups, I run into, excuse me, a combination of issues. One is that people, and I've been told directly by CEOs of fairly large providers, that they are terrified of the Trump administration. They're terrified that if they were to join, I'll give you an example. I am looking for representation. I would love to have an attorney help me with this case because as a pro se plaintiff, I cannot represent anyone else. And I would love all persons who would be affected by this executive order, all the clients of the continuum of care, to be certified as a class. It's over 700,000 individuals. I would love to have class action for declaratory judgment, if that's possible. I'm not even sure. And I would, but attorneys look at the case. Maybe they think it's not quite ready yet. Maybe they would love to see how it goes. Maybe it's because they aren't the ones who drafted it. Maybe it's because of me and my background, because I'm not an attorney or I'm not educated or I'm not a professional because I'm homeless. Who
So
knows?
you think that well, essentially what you're saying is if you were to able to have an attorney pick this up, they could do it on behalf of all homeless people in America, essentially.
I believe so. And what I think what the actual term is on behalf of all others similarly situated. So
Okay.
I think that's like the legal term for it. But yes, an attorney could represent not just myself, but all of us who stand to lose and to have our liberties kind of infringed upon
H-
by the executive order.
How would that be different? Because essentially, if you can stop the executive order, then it would help everyone else.
Yes, it would. So what this will be is this will be the freedom version of the trickle down effect. This is trickle down for liberty. So the if my claim prevails, it would essentially be an aid to millions of Americans. Even though the claim would only be in my name, the once the executive order is declared unconstitutional, the policies that would have affected people nationwide would be stopped in their tracks, and that's why I'm doing it.
And it could set precedents for anybody
Yes,
to
I too am terrified of the Trump administration, just
kind
like everybody else.
of
I'm very afraid
why are you doing it if you're afraid?
because I, because I love America. I love this country. I love the people around me, and I believe that we have it in us to do good well for ourselves, to do good by each other, and I believe that there's a better way, like a better perspective, a transcendent philosophy that is not just to kind of do away with those who seem like they have no value, but to recognize the intrinsic value of the human soul. And I believe that that love is the most powerful force. I believe it's contagious, and I hope that this case again will not just be about the executive order, but I hope to have the media begin to talk about housing as a human right.
So I was just thinking about the media. Homeless man sues president seems like a tremendous headline. Why don't you think you've
You
been
would
getting
think so, right?
run?
Well, I have reached out to a number of media outlets, and I have heard back from a couple who expressed interest in the story, but they just kind of disappeared. And I believe that maybe the media is not interested in me, or maybe they believe that the case is not right. There are parallel cases, none quite like mine, directly challenging the executive order and the president. But for whatever reason, it's just not happened or happening, at least at this time. But it's okay. I am going to trust that if I do the right thing, that God will meet me halfway.
This is where I kind of become a bit of a conspiracy theorist because there's people who have agendas who own media companies, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Um, I'm trying to think of how to ask, how does this affect you personally outside of your experience in this particular journey? Because I would think that you would pop up on three-letter, agencies, on their radar once you start to sue the president.
Well, I have not had any direct contact with any agencies. Not even the Department of Justice has entered an appearance into the case yet. And I think that one of the strategies may be to make me feel like I'm screaming in the wind, to ignore me. I am an invisible person. Homeless people are invisible in America. So this is a part of that. And because I'm uneducated, because I'm homeless, there is a real stigma there and a tendency to say, well, the case must be kind of a quack. It will be laughed out of court. I hope that's not the case. I believe in the court system here, and I know there are a lot of good people out there. So again, I'm just going to do my best, but it does concern me that I haven't heard received any media coverage whatsoever. Um, there's nothing I can't control that. For me personally, this is healing for me because I do really suffer from severe mental health conditions. So this helps me kind of be lucid. This helps me maintain focus, and it gives me hope that other people will have the chance to heal, to be healed, and myself. I want to be stable. I want to have a chance to heal my mind and my body, and I have that hope. So that alone is keeping me going, and I'm gonna continue.
We are in January 2026.
Yes.
What are the next steps?
Okay. So the next step is the government will enter an appearance in the case by the 27th of this month. They will most certainly file a motion to dismiss, and they will try to get the government to I mean, they will ask the court to throw the claim out, to dismiss the claim outright. They'll say that I don't have standing. They'll say what's called failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. So they'll say for various reasons that I can't bring this lawsuit. I will, of course, file an opposition to that and some other things, and the court will decide whether or not this is something that I can bring and that they want to hear. They'll decide if this is appropriate. Um,
So
the for,
you say they're going to claim that you don't have standing. Why would they be able to claim that? Or is it
well,
just generically they just always?
well, no. So in particular, courts are very exact with claims. You have to make specific claims, and one of the things that they'll want to know is that I am personally harmed by the claim. So I can't just sue that, hey, this is wrong, and that some people somewhere will be harmed. I'm suing as a homeless person who will be targeted as a direct result of the executive order. I'm suing as a person living within the continuum of care, designated for housing, who will lose access to those services as a result of the executive order and policies that were created to be in compliance with the executive order. And that harm is imminent. So that is what my claim is. And the courts will decide if that is true, if that is enough. And I'm sure the government will argue that it is not. And we'll see how it goes.
So we're looking at a kind of a true David and Goliath kind of situation. What makes you think it's possible? Or which, what do you think the likelihood of progress is?
I think about that a lot. What makes you think that you could do something like that? Who do you
Okay.
think you are? Right? Well, I do believe in God. I believe in America. I believe in the Constitution. And I've had a lot of experiences in my life that have brought me to this point. And I actually believe in this phrase that says God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the call. So when we think about why are the CEOs of the local nonprofits are terrified to get involved because they have jobs, because they do have a home, because they do have families and situations that they're afraid to lose. The same thing with the advocacy attorneys. It is the people who have so much to lose that are afraid to take this step. And it's precisely because if this policy is implemented, I will literally be on the street and may die of exposure, hunger, or maybe forced into a concentration camp or something like that. Because I have nothing to lose, I'm the one who has the most to gain by by filing the claim. And I think that that's it is a David and Goliath situation, and I hope that my at the same time, I do want to say that just because our court system is what they call an adversarial court system, but I don't think of the president as my adversary. I don't think of HUD as my adversary. I think of this more as a negotiation. I am bringing something to their attention. I'm asking these people who I respect, these people at the Department of Justice, and I'm sure that when you sue the president, there are some agencies that are going to take a look at you, that are going to kind of see who you are and what you're about. And these are all smart people. These are educated people. These are like really the best of the best that America has to offer. And for me, it's a win-win. Even if my claim is not heard, um, it is heard simply by having a federal judge read what I'm saying. I don't have to be the person who brings this idea to its fruition. I am imprinting this claim into the minds of everyone who looks at it and looks at me, and it can't be unheard. You can't unring the bell. So every time um, some special agent, some a U.S. attorney, a federal judge, or any person like that looks at the claim, reads the claim, they are impressed by it, and I mean impressed in that word is it touches them. And so it touches their mind. You can't unread what you read. And I have faith that they uh, are smart people. They have families. They're trying to do their job. These are not evil people. And I believe that the president himself is a piece of American history. This is somebody who he's certainly a polarizing figure, and there are a lot of people who feel different ways about him. But I respect him as the president of the United States, and I respect the incredible amounts of struggle that he's had in his life. And I believe that he loves his country because he's legit Americana, like baseball and apple pie. And I think that that he has the capacity to see a big vision for America. Um, and I think that in the end, this is much more like evangelism. This is much more of a communications process than this is a fight or a war or, any of those kind of me versus you frameworks, mental frameworks. I don't really think of it like that. I'm honored to be able to bring this claim. I'm honored to have my thoughts and my name come across the desks of my betters. These people are legitimately better than me. Okay. They made better decisions with their life. They're in high positions of authority and I respect them. And I'm just asking them to hear me out. So I really feel great about it. And right now, I think the David and Goliath narrative is fun to think about. And it might sound great for the media. But for me, um, I think of it kind of differently, just more of uh, a breeze, a whisper, a sign, or something. It's just like, hey, I'm just bringing this to your attention. Can we talk about it?
Yeah. So you said the Constitution, God, and America. Are those things all that you think are on your side in this endeavor?
They're all I have. You know, I'm really living at the bottom of society. Like I am actually sitting on my shelter bed. Um, and I'm here, you know, for various reasons. There are systemic reasons why there are systemic reasons that aren't necessarily bad why there are millions of people becoming homeless in this country. There is a stigma, there is a belief that everyone who has lost their job, who has gotten evicted, or who have found themselves facing housing instability has done so through some character flaw. And I would like to offer an alternative perspective is that we and that is true and you know there is a lot of that going on but we also live in an age I read a meme earlier today that says we live in a country where I'll be thinking that I'm bad with money whole time I just bought food. You
Hmm.
know, and so we're just living in a society where we it's widely reported that incomes are stagnant, you know, since the 70s. The price of a house has gone from, you know, our my parents, my you know, boomers and the greatest generation bought houses for 50,000, 80,000, 112,000. Um and they came into the careers and they were able to grow whereas a person coming out of college today, a male who exits college today, makes no more money than an individual with a high school diploma, and that income is $20 an hour or less. And so we just happen to live in a system where the majority of people simply cannot afford to own property to really get a piece of the American dream. And so this is happening to more than just the careless, the afflicted, the down,
I
you
was.
know, the
It does.
irresponsible.
It does seem like it's coming. Homelessness is coming for more and more a wider percentage of people, not just more people. I was going to ask you, why should the average person care, and how does it affect them? Like,
Yes. Well, if you talk to the average boomer, one of their kids is dealing with either and in fact boomers themselves are one of the largest growing populations facing housing instability. So if you talk to anybody ages 65 or under, there's a significant chance that they or one of their children or family members are facing not just housing stability issues, but also mental health issues or substance abuse issues. So these issues are becoming so widespread. They're really now endemic to American culture. EBT, as we know, we just in the recent government shutdown, we all learned that there are 41 million Americans receiving SNAP. The majority of those people are working or elderly and disabled. You know what I'm saying? So this country, there are so many people that is not really because they're bad people or because they're just idiots. It's because people are able to afford less and less. They're getting paid less and less. There are less and less traditional jobs and opportunities available for them, and they long to do great. They long to operate at their full capacity. We all want to uh, stand on our own 2 feet and operate as best we can, but we live in a hive now, and so everybody needs their little piece of the honeycomb.
if if people don't get anything else from you, what's the heart of your message? What's one thing that you want people to know, or however many things you want people to know and leave with?
The most important thing I could say is that love is a universal force. Housing is a human right, and that this case is about challenging an executive order, but it's more about challenging an antiquated mindset, a philosophy that is not evil, but it's simply obsolete. It's past its time. It just is an attempt to make it work, to make the system work as we're all struggling to figure out how are we going to move forward as humans, as individuals. And that's what this is about approaching our country, our system um, with a mindset where everyone has a chance to operate as their best selves. And housing is fundamental to being a human, like air, water, and food, and so and healthcare. So we want to think from first principles. First principles are not dollars and cents. Okay. Those are technical details. Those are tools that we use to help make people's lives better. The first principle is the vision that we're called to love one another and to build something great. And I think that if we start there and try to figure out how we're going to do that, then the rest will come together. And I hope that the president um, will be willing, will see me will be willing to hear me out, even though I'm not on the level of people like that. I hope that I'm able to have these words transmitted up there somehow through the various people who my claim will touch throughout this process.
It seems like a pretty good place to kind of wrap up with, it seemed like a pretty good ending statement. But is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to go over? Is there anything that we missed that you can think of right now?
No, I really think we kind of went to the heart of it. That yeah, we have a case. We're challenging funding issues. We're challenging an executive order, but this is bigger than that. We're really talking about the the principles of this country, about individual liberty, where I believe that housing, property, and liberty are really inseparable. If you're going to exist freely, you have to have a place to exist in. And that's why housing is a human right, and it's essential to human freedom. And this is just a part of our evolution as Americans and as citizens of this world that we live in. And I think we covered everything quite nicely. And I really appreciate you, Mike. You know, you're one of the best human beings that I know. I'm thankful that we
Say
did
that
this.
camera.
Yeah.
uh, oh man, I forget what I was gonna say. Yeah, I forget. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Oh man, we can do this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, love you, man.
Thank you, Mike. Love you too, bro.
Yeah.